Speak up, speak out, let's talk about it. Welcome to the show where you can show your love, no doubt about it. Where self-love and self-worth are the topics of the day. Right here on the Just Blah Show, where love is the only way. And here are your hosts, Barb and Faye.
Hi, and welcome to Just Blah. I'm Faye.
And this is Barb.
We're here today to talk about some new things that Barbara's been covering. She started a women's group, and we wanted just kind of to go over some of the things that they discuss in their groups. One of the things that I know we've talked about is I guess you can call it a condition called unconditional love. Can you explain a little bit of what unconditional love is and what it looks like?
Sure. Before I jump into that, what Faye is referring to is I started a women's group on Tuesday nights here in my home, and that's just to come together and to have women come in and tell their truth, to be seen, accepted, and loved, which I'll go into a little bit later. Unconditional love, at least on my understanding, is when two people come together without expectations of another person, meaning that we do acts of kindness through what's it called, because we're not trying to get something from them, an expectation. Usually people show up and say, well, I do this and I do that for him, or I do this and I do that for her, and that's an indication that we're not coming from a space of unconditional love but conditional love.
I see. And what would be, say, an example, say, from your life that you remember practicing, be it with a spouse or your children or friends or whomever?
So for me, yay, a personal story. For me, I could see back in my marriage that I would play the martyr. Like I do all these things, and I was like, oh my gosh, I cook, I clean, I work, I take the kids to school, I do all these things, and he does nothing. And poor me, blah, 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 right? It's the victim story and a love story. And what it is that it's really creates that divide between me and my spouse of the time, or any relationship for that matter, because I have an expectation of having either being recognized or getting something or having help without asking, which is a whole nother subject. I expected him to show up and look at everything I'm doing. So I was trying to prove that my worth through being passive aggressive without just saying, hey, I'm doing this. And I remember the time when I was really upset and I was doing dishes, and I'm just like, why am I doing this? And I just said to myself, I'm doing this for me because I enjoy clean dishes. I'm not doing it because he needs clean dishes or my kids need clean dishes. Yes, they do. That's the outcome. They get the gift of that. But the reason what made me kind of switch was I was like, wait, I'm doing this for me because I like having clean dishes to eat off of. So they don't, and they don't have the capacity or the desire to do the dishes. So for me, I wanted the dishes done, and for some reason it just sticks out in my head is that it just popped, and then it took that anger away, and I no longer had I guess like the nagging sense of like, why don't you do the dishes? I'm always doing the dishes. I was like, I'm doing the dishes because I really want clean dishes, and it's not because I want them to do the dishes. I can always make a request, and it was usually a no, because when you get a request they have the right to say no, and I would be okay with it after that. I mean, it's a small thing, but it started there.
That's nice. Yeah, that's why I'm into paper plates. It kind of avoids that conflict.
Yeah.
And I noticed in the story when you were talking about the martyr, did I say that right? Martyr?
The martyr
story. I heard that sense of judgment of your spouse, well, all he does.
Yeah.
And it felt like that's kind of not understanding who your spouse is, because if you knew who your spouse was, I don't know if you would have that. I mean, in that time, in that place, I understand it. But in my understanding, that's kind of how you build that type of
dynamic
of like, why am I doing all this? You put yourself on your own pedestal, basically.
Sure.
And everybody else is not. I guess you see what you want to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so sometimes I guess you see what you want to see, and unconditional love is actually seeing them as they are.
Yeah, and
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and accepting them where they are with their yes and no's. And for me, being passive aggressive in that time was such a practice for me. So I was like, why can't he see everything I'm doing, and why doesn't he validate me for X, Y, Z, and instead of just saying requesting what I wanted, because then I would have had the answer. And if I had a yes or a no, yes, he did it and he's an amazing guy and I praise him, or no, he says no and he's a super jerk and I get to be even a bigger victim in my story because of his no. And so the switch is really just being okay, like you said, with his answer. And it's not like you can't get clarifying answers or really explain to your spouse through safe conversations, which we talk about later. Why this is important to you, so you can be heard. So it really was just a power struggle for the two of us. I mean, I can see that now. And we did our best to work through that, and we've grown as adults and as a couple, and then eventually we did divorce. But it was I learned a lot.
It was a divorce, but I saw it as a divorce through growth, because
Yes.
I mean, I know both of you, so
Yeah.
and I've seen that both of you have grown
Yes.
as individual people or persons,
Sure.
and I think it's given both of you the capacity to be able to maybe explore other relationships and not re-experience the same passive aggressive or that same type of behaviors. Thank you. In a new one, because now you're aware, you're aware, and I know that it comes down to practice. And to me, I go, oh, that sounds like someone who would be a perfectionist, and they get to have their victim story, or somebody who's very controlling. And if you say no, they get to have their victim story, and it's that poor me. Why is everybody against me type of thing? And again, it goes back to, and it comes with practice, because I know for myself that even though I know this stuff, I still find myself getting, excuse the expression, pissy when somebody tells me no, and then I have to catch myself and go, okay, this isn't about them, it's about me, and why is it triggering me?
Yeah.
And so I think it comes with practice, and I don't think you ever stop practicing.
Oh no, no. And if you're
You
done,
can
you're
regulate
you are done in the sense of
That's
growing. But really, what it lends to and what we speak to in the group as well, in the women's group, and there's also other co-ed groups that are facilitated by other people, is what we're speaking to is imitation love. And it doesn't mean that it's not love, but we get caught up in what they call, pleasure, praise, safety, and power.
Yeah.
So if you look back on it, like if you look at my relationship with my partner in my marriage, it was we practice all of those. I think the biggest one for us was the biggest struggle was the power and the safety. He came from a place of power, and I did too, but I also wanted to create safety, which is the passive aggressiveness, meaning that I was willing to what I call dim down or become the martyr to make it feel safe in the walking on eggshells, because I didn't want to upset him. And so it just turned into this whole what we call the codependent dance that you and I have talked about before. And so we created this pattern for many, many years. For those who don't know, we were together, married for 26 years, dated for 2. So we have a pattern of triggering that pain body that we had, and it became a very comfortable, safe place for us to be. So that's how we learned how to relate with each other. And we just had a very difficult time through our journey moving out of it. But it was like carrying rocks with us. So it was a long process, but we did manage to do that, and we're very good friends now.
Yeah, it was just, it sounds like the capacity for grace wasn't there for either one of you, because of the patterns that were developed over those 28 years.
Yes.
And it's very hard to break those patterns, especially if one is committed and one isn't so much. Not that that was your story, but I see it where someone is wanting so much for whatever it is to be the perfect relationship, however that looks. And there's no such thing as perfection, but people do get wrapped up in these fairy tale, this is how it's supposed to be.
Your if onlys.
Yeah, your if onlys, and your Cinderella stories, and then there's always that disappointment of when reality sets in, that there's moments of fairy tales in relationships.
Oh, of course,
Yeah,
of
but
course.
but
Yeah.
it's not the reality of a
Yeah.
relationship, and I think people get disappointed in that.
Yeah.
In that realization. I guess that's part of growing up. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's really emotional maturity. And so when you stop and take the pause, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what these groups do, is help you to pause, and it helps you to tell the truth from your perspective. And if you have a tough time doing it from your perspective, you will be gently reminded, maybe sometimes directly reminded, that you can't tell somebody else's story and what you think they are thinking.
Yes.
We can only know who we are wholly. And even our closest friends, spouse, children, we cannot know them wholly. So to claim that is to be it's a power safety dynamic. So the purpose of loving groups, is with the group that we do it with, that I facilitate with, and with Beautiful Mess and Amour de Soi, is having people have a space to tell their truth. And the truth is coming from the perspective of talking about your behaviors. And the behaviors I'm talking about is lying. And we'll go into that even more on another one. Lying shows up in many different forms. Attacking, which also comes in many forms. It's not just that outright raging at somebody.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to attack somebody, and we'll talk about that as well. And acting like a victim, which is like, what? Yeah, it's amazing how we don't identify how we're acting like a victim. And then clinging, obviously that sounds very straightforward, but there's a lot of different ways to become clinging and not even realize we're doing it. It's really with the sense of why we're doing it, and of course running either physically or emotionally. And so anytime we're really in any of these behaviors, what we're doing is like we're saying, I don't have the space to hear the other person I'm trying to communicate with, and I need to be loved and heard. And if you have two people coming together trying to have that communication at the same time, it breaks down and it breaks into deeper behaviors. So this is what this is all about, is the group to come in and to realize, so you can make different choices around, like for me, I'm a runner. So like when I used to get into arguments, or even now today, I will shut down, meaning I won't respond. I'll just sit there and...
It's disassociation.
Yeah, disassociate.
Yeah, which is a
with
form
them.
of running. People think, oh, you physically run away from the individual, and it's really not that. It's just not emotionally or spiritually, or however you want to word it, being there. You're there physically, but spiritually or emotionally, you're just checked out.
Well, I'm trying to create safety for myself. So by not responding to... usually it's somebody with a lot of anger at me, and it's like, okay, if I don't say anything, they'll stop.
If they go up, I'm going down, because I need to create balance.
Yeah.
And that's basically what you're doing when you're shutting down. If you're having someone who is attacking you or coming at you and anger, basically it's because they want to be heard. But in order to offset that, or I'm big into balance. I don't want. I'm not a drama person. So if somebody's going up, I'm that person that's like, okay, I'm going to go down, because we need balance here, and if we're both up here, it's going to explode. So that's how I see it, and I think we can get deeper into each one of these, but I kind of want to go back a little bit on something I heard you said, and you were talking about the 4 forms, and I wanted you to maybe get into that a little bit again. I think you said it was praise, power, pleasure, and safety. If you can just maybe just talk about what imitation love is, and what unconditional love is, and how that looks, and how it would look as imitation love, and then versus unconditional love.
Well, does
that make sense?
Yeah, I guess the simplest way to say unconditional love is connecting. Imitation love is disconnecting, meaning like when we're unconditionally loving somebody, that means we don't have expectations of how they show up in the experience. We're not buying into the story of the story they have of us, and we're just experiencing in the moment, being present. So it creates that connection, and you get to decide if you feel loved or if you feel disconnected. Imitation love is when we're trying to get something from somebody. If you don't show up a certain way, or if you don't do a certain thing, then I have the right to be mad at you, or to lie to you, or to ignore you, or whatever the behavior might be for you in order to get what you want. So it perpetuates the behavior chain, where in unconditional love it doesn't. It's present, and it's just right there. Imitation love is an ongoing struggle through power, praise, pleasure, or safety.
Now, can you give an example of like maybe in a statement what a praise or power or pleasure, and say, I mean, what would that look like if you can paint a picture
So
of
praise
that?
is like somebody that you know that who is continually looking for validation for their worth outward. So they could brag a lot. They could extenuate the story to make themselves look good. So they're looking for some form of praise, which gives them that hit, which releases the endorphins and all that good stuff.
You mean like today? I'm like, look at my rock.
Yeah.
We did a rock painting contest.
Yeah, we did a kindness rocks party.
Look at my rock.
Look at my rock, isn't this cool? So so we're
Yeah.
just getting that, and that's like a simple way of getting praise, but it can go much deeper than that, and it can go into what I call performing or proving, and proving yourself. Like I got my master's, or I'm a doctoral, and I'm a this. It's the people with all the toys and all the things, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with having all that. That's what we're giving those gifts. But if we use it for the like the Barbie doll wife or the Ken guy, and we're willing to sacrifice our own spiritual happiness to have the image, that would be a form of praise. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then power, of course, is you always hear people say, well, I'm walking on eggshells, or I feel uncomfortable with this person. So it's really a power struggle, and you don't know how to navigate it because you're trying to create safety and they're trying to take over power, and it's very scary. So, that's in and of itself, I don't think I have to go too deep into the power.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like angry. It could be a very assertive, passive-aggressive person that makes you feel, it's the feeling, whether it's coming out in a rage from that's setting that
well,
off.
if you think about what they call the helicopter mom, right, or the soccer mom, not all of them are that way, obviously, but that's like
an example that people use, a generalization.
Yeah, it's a form of power.
Not everybody's that way.
No, not everybody's that way, but it can be used in that, and that's because when you hear that, most people go, oh, because it's a
they have
negative
an idea.
connotation, but I've met plenty of lovely people who have been labeled that aren't that. So, and the other thing is pleasure. So pleasure can come in many, many, many forms, and that's any type of pleasure, from food, sex, addiction to just being in front of people. It doesn't even matter what it is. It's where you get a sense of pleasure. Usually it's a physical pleasure or a visual pleasure.
Or it releases the endorphins, like video games, anything that would basically do that for you. Not everybody gets triggered the same way in pleasure.
So pornography would be one. That's a big one. Food is a big one for people. Another one is somebody who can never be alone type of person. They always have to be around people, or they're depressed or get sad of people.
I would even put addicted to exercise in that.
Oh yes, exercise
because it releases that endorphins, and
it
they get
really
addicted.
It's really all of that, and that all. I mean, obviously these all intertwine on some level. It's just that we tend to be more drawn to easy to manipulate, and these are all forms of manipulation. So and we just all have our one that, like, for me, I love pleasure, or not pleasure, I'm sorry, I like praise, and I like safety. I do like pleasure, but that would be at the bottom, but that's not where my go-to is creating safety and getting praise. So I'm very mindful about that, and I accept that in myself. Because I'm like, who the hell doesn't like to be told they're beautiful or they're smart, intelligent, whatever it is. It's like, it's great, but I kind of do it with a sense of humor now, because I know that's my hook, and I do have to be mindful of it sometimes, because sometimes I can get hooked in and go, oh, wait a second, is this what I'm really wanting, or am I tripping back into old behaviors? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I totally accept that part of who I am, and I'm mindful of it.
And not all these things always show up as imitation of it. It's just being human. And if you're not experiencing this type of feelings and emotions, then you might be just creating safety, let's say, of trying to not, you can't be perfect.
No. And this isn't about being perfect. Like, everything we do, like, all of these are just indications. I believe that everything that we're given emotionally or feelings, right? Because there's a difference between emotions and feelings, but we're giving that as an indication of where we're sitting. So it's in the intention in which we're doing something. So one day I can be authentically being me and getting praise, and that's totally authentic, and I wasn't trying to get praise. But the next day I could talk about the same exact thing, but I'm trying to get praise because I'm feeling kind of down or whatever.
You want that same feeling you had yesterday.
Same feeling yesterday. So it's something very basic, and none of it's wrong. It's just to help you indicate, because if you're feeling like, I guess on the lower scale of feelings, right, at a lower vibration, and then you show up in behavior, then we kind of get like a behavior. Behavior is a hard word for me because it's really not a behavior. It's just who we are,
Yeah.
and it's what we're trying to get. And if we're just being authentically real, and if somebody says you're in behavior, you get to decide whether you're not or not. I mean, it's really your story to write. And I've had plenty of people say no, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That's a cool story of me, but they didn't ask me, so I didn't explain it because I didn't have to prove myself. So I'm totally fine with it.
So you'll know if you're coming from an unconditional place, or if and you can't kid yourself. So
No.
you know if you're intentionally doing something that would fall under the imitation love because you're trying to get something from someone.
You know when you're lying.
Well,
You know when you're attacking or trying to protect yourself. You know when you're being defensive. I mean, the other person may not realize it because it's at such a low level or such a high level that it's not recognizable by them. But you know your intention.
Yeah.
So it can be something as easy as like you're talking to your teenage kid and you say you're listening, but you're really not. You're just trying to get them to stop talking. So you're like, yeah, but you're really not paying attention. That's a behavior.
Yeah.
It's a very subtle behavior, but it's so commonplace in your life that it's not recognized as behavior. It's just the way you show up in your conversations, which is a whole other conversation.
And so basically, it's really, when you talk about unconditional love and imitation love, it's really just getting to know who you are and how you're showing up in that moment. And just be aware of it. It doesn't make you right. It doesn't make you wrong.
No.
Just be aware of it. And if you choose to accept it, great. Then no matter how you're showing up, as long as you're good with it.
Yeah.
But if it's not it doesn't feel right to you, then
If you're shaming and blaming yourself or other people, then you might want to look at that. I mean, you don't have to. You're more than welcome to stay where you are in the vibration. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you want the quality of life that you're speaking of, where you're feeling happiness from the inside out, it would be a good practice to know who you are, at what level, how you show up. And so another thing as you were speaking, I was like, my groups go into, people come in and they tell their stories about their day or something going on or what they're, thinking. And what I really do is just ask basic, simple questions. And there are simple questions that our audience can ask themselves too. It's like when you understand, like say you're at work and you're having a confrontation with your boss or the office know-it-all. It's like, why am I getting irritated by this person, or I'm afraid of this person? It's like, what am I wanting? What am I afraid of? And how can I ask for what I want, right? And so it's just, you have to show up and practice. This stuff doesn't come overnight, and you're not going to do it perfect. And if you think you're going to do it perfect, you're going to have a lot of disappointment, which is creating your own expectations on yourself, which goes right back into the behaviors and not loving yourself on an unconditional loving way.
So what you're talking about really is about practicing telling your own truth.
Yeah.
So whoever you're communicating with, it's their choice whether to accept you the way you're presenting yourself. As long as you're being truthful to yourself, you should be with peace with that, knowing that you're being truthful and you're not being deceitful in any way. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but just showing up in a way that would
sometimes
be...
we, as we say, lie by omission.
Yes.
Because of fear of, maybe triggering somebody into anger or being rejected. It all goes down to our core wounds and the way we show up. And we either show up, either being protective or defensive. And we can teeter between the two depending on who we're dealing with in front of us. So it's really about telling your truth and being seen for wholly who you are, with what they say, your warts and all. So that's all it is, and it's about accepting yourself. And also, once you can step into accepting yourself, you really kind of soften your stance in black and white, and everything has to be perfect, and you let people be who they are, and you don't have the urge to fix them or label them. You're just like, wow, we just realize that these people need to be loved, right? Because when I have people come at me right now who are who are really angry, I no longer get triggered into fear and go into that head, what's it called, the deer in the headlight look. I just like, oh, this is a cry for love. Do I have the capacity to do that? Or do I need to make what we call a gracious withdrawal? And we'll talk about that later. It's how you leave a conversation that you don't have the capacity to be a loving presence for this person. And that's really loving yourself, choosing yourself first so you can be loving for other people. It's really about getting down into owning who you are, not believing who you are, but knowing who you are. And once you know who you are, this all it is a matter of practicing and just over and over and over again practicing these little exercises or little things in communication that makes a huge difference.
Yes, and like they said that success is a road filled with failure. It's try again. The thing is, the only way you're going to fail is if you quit.
Yes.
So it's really important that that you practice these things, and you're human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Every day, more
That's the
human than I
gift.
want to be sometimes.
Yeah, that's
but
the gift.
that is the gift. It's the lesson, and it's just just be who you are and be just be.
Yeah.
And I don't know how else to put it. And I guess we need to wrap it up here. But if you have any comments, feel free to go to our webpage at justblah.com. There is a comment section, and you can also email us at justblah@gmail. Or just blah us. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just blah us at gmail.com. And if you have any questions on anything, we'd be more than welcome to address your questions, or if you want a subject covered, or whatever it is. Barb, do you have any parting words?
Yeah, if anybody really wants the guidelines that we read every week in our meetings, I'm more than happy to do that. You can email me, and I will have it on barbheight.com. And also there's other places that it is available. So it's amazing the way this information can transform your life. And I hope that you're brave enough and courageous enough to step in and at least read it and just go, yep, it's for me or not. Because you'll know when you read it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing with us, Barb, and I've enjoyed this conversation. Until next time.
Peace out. Bye.